Harvey Dalton didn't expect to become a hero that morning. He just wanted to get through his shift at the hardware store without his daughter's school calling again about overdue lunch balances. "Dad, she's in 3rd grade," his coworker Ray had joked earlier. "How much can a kid eat?" Harvey gave a half laugh before heading to aisle 5 to restock paint cans, his mind already running through the math. Rent, groceries, Maddie's school trip, and the shoes she outgrew overnight. He was crouched down, reaching for a box of screws when he heard it a sharp creak above, followed by the sickening groan of metal. He looked up. A top shelf was tipping. The entire rack began to lean forward, loaded with heavy toolboxes and paint thinner. And directly beneath it stood a woman, distracted, scrolling through a notebook with a pen in her mouth. "Hey," Harvey lunged forward without thinking. The shelf gave way. He threw himself between her and the falling weight, catching the edge with both arms. The impact rattled up his spine, but he held it steady until Ray sprinted over and helped brace it. The woman had stumbled back, eyes wide. "Are you okay?" Harvey asked, panting, his arms trembling under the weight. She stared at him like he'd just stepped out of a movie. "You caught that," she said softly. He gave her a quick once-over. She was tall, elegant, dressed in a crisp white blouse and heels that didn't belong in a hardware store. Her notebook had fallen open on the ground pages full of architectural sketches. "I'm fine," she said, brushing a strand of dark auburn hair behind her ear. "You could have been crushed." "Well," he said, still catching his breath, "so could you." Her lips curved just barely. "Thank you." He nodded and turned back to help Ray finish securing the shelf, already feeling the ache in his shoulders. He didn't see her again until 2 hours later. He was at the register, ringing up a contractor's cart of lumber, when she walked up to the counter, holding a small box of screws and a pack of sandpaper. "Oh," Harvey said, blinking, "you're still here." "Had to finish measurements," she said. "I'm working on a historical building downtown. I needed the right finish for the new panels." He scanned her items. "That'll be $6. She handed over cash, still watching him. "You work here full-time." "Yeah," he hesitated. "I've got a daughter, so, you know." "Single dad." "Yeah." She was quiet for a second, then extended her hand. "I'm Fallon Hartley." He shook it. "Harvey Dalton." "You saved my life, Harvey Dalton." Just did what anyone would have done. She tilted her head. "I don't think most people would have dove under a shelf for a stranger." He chuckled once. "Well, lucky for you, I've got good reflexes." Fallon smiled fully this time. "I owe you a coffee." "You don't owe me anything." "I insist." He hesitated. "I've gotta pick up my kid from school in an hour." "There's a cafe across the street," she said. "I'll meet you there, 20 minutes. He nodded before he could talk himself out of it. 20 minutes later, he found her at a small corner table, 2 coffees already on the table, plus a croissant she pushed toward him. "I didn't know what you liked, so I guessed." "I like croissants," he said. She smiled like she already knew. They talked. About the building she was restoring an old music hall from the 20s. About how she was raised in Chicago but came to this city when she was 23. About how she loved design, history, and strong coffee. He told her about Maddie. About how his wife had left when their daughter was 1, and how he'd been doing everything since. "You're doing a good job," she said, after he showed her a picture of Maddie in her Halloween costume NASA astronaut, homemade helmet and all. "You don't even know me," he said. "I know enough." He glanced at the time. "I should go." She stood with him. "Can I see you again?" He paused. "Are you sure?" "Very." So they did. The next week, Fallon showed up again. This time she asked if he wanted to grab dinner. Harvey hesitated. I don't really do fancy places. She laughed. It's a taco truck by the river. I know the owner. He brought Maddie. She liked Fallon immediately. She talks like she's from the movies, Maddie said on the drive home. She's pretty. Harvey smiled. Yeah, she is. Fallon kept showing up. She met them at the park. She helped Maddie with a science project. She brought over lasagna and ate it with them on the floor because they didn't have a real dining table. And every time Harvey looked at her, he felt something twist in his chest. Like he'd been walking around half asleep for years, and now everything was in color. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't have guessed, was that Fallon Hartley wasn't just some project architect. She was the owner of the firm, of the building, of 10 more across the city. And she was a millionaire. Not that she ever said it. Because Fallon was already in love with him. And she didn't know how to tell him the truth. That she wasn't just some woman who needed hardware. She was a woman who had everything. And still felt like she had nothing until the day a poor dad caught a falling shelf and looked at her like she was the only person in the world. Fallon parked 2 blocks away from Harvey's apartment and turned off the engine, her fingers tightening around the steering wheel. The neighborhood was quiet this time of evening brick buildings lined up like tired soldiers, a corner store flickering with a broken open sign, and a group of teenagers laughing as they kicked a dented soccer ball across the cracked pavement. She'd been there before, of course. 3 times, to be exact. Once for tacos, once for a movie night with Maddie, and once when Harvey called her in a panic because his water heater had burst and he didn't know where to shut it off. She'd brought towels, not because he asked, he never asked, but because she couldn't stand the sound of strain in his voice. Now she sat frozen in her car, staring at the crumpled envelope in her lap. Inside was the proposal, the real one. Not for a date, not for coffee, but for a life-changing renovation grant she'd arranged under a false name through her company's outreach fund. Harvey didn't know it existed. He thought he was applying to some city program for small businesses and historic rentals. He also didn't know she owned the fund, or the building he lived in, or that she'd rewritten the eligibility requirements herself because she couldn't stand the thought of him losing his apartment when the lease expired in 2 months. She'd told herself it wasn't dishonest, it was kindness. But now, with the truth pressing against her ribs like a secret she couldn't swallow, it felt like something else. Her phone buzzed, 1 ring, then silence. She tucked the envelope into her purse and stepped out into the cool evening air. The sidewalk was uneven, her heels clicking softly as she approached the building. The 3rd-floor window glowed with warm light. She could hear a soft swell of music, something orchestral and sweeping, not what she expected. But then again, Harvey surprised her in quiet ways. He always had. The door opened before she could knock. "You didn't buzz," he said, holding it open with a towel still slung over his shoulder. His shirt was damp at the collar. "I figured it was you." "Sorry, I didn't want to wake Maddie." "She's asleep, big day, science fair." He motioned for her to come in. She got 3rd place, made a volcano that actually smoked. Fallon stepped inside, inhaling the scent of lemon cleaner and something faintly cinnamon. The apartment was small, but it always felt full of music, of laughter, of something unspoken between them that neither had dared name. "She'll want to tell you about it tomorrow," Harvey added. "She already asked if you'd be at the park." "I will," she said. He picked up a mug from the counter and offered it to her. Tea, peppermint. She accepted it, surprised. "I saw you drink it once, figured it wasn't a fluke." She took a sip. "It's perfect." He sat across from her at the small table, his elbows resting on the wood. There was a softness in his eyes she hadn't seen before, less guarded, more curious. "You okay?" he asked. You look like you're carrying something heavy. She hesitated, fingers tightening around the mug. I've been thinking about how much we don't know about each other. That's a big statement. Well, it's true. He leaned back slightly. You want to know if I've got skeletons in the closet. I want to know what matters to you, what scares you, what you dream about. Harvey's gaze dropped to the table for a moment, then returned to hers. You're not like anyone I've met. That's not an answer. He gave a short breath of a laugh. All right, what scares me? Losing Maddie, not being enough, not giving her the life she deserves. Fallon said nothing, just listened. And what I want? He looked at her more directly now. I want to build something, not just fix things. I want to actually make something that lasts, like my dad did. Your father, what did he build? He was a carpenter. Built porches, gazebos, barns, nothing fancy but solid. Real. He died before Maddie was born, but I still use his level and square. Fallon's throat tightened. You've never mentioned him before. I don't talk about him much. He was the kind of guy who thought emotions were for football games and funerals. Still, he sounds like someone who left a mark. He did, quietly. She reached into her bag, pulled out the envelope, and laid it on the table. What's that? I need to tell you something before, give it to you. He studied her face. Okay. I haven't been completely honest with you. Harvey didn't move, just waited. I don't work for the architecture firm. I own it, and not just that, I own the Hartley Foundation. It funds restoration projects across the city. He blinked once, then again. Wait, Hartley, as in your name. Yes. You're the one who created the grant, applied for. Yes, I built it for small-scale renovators. I made sure your application would qualify. He sat back, eyes narrowing slightly, not with anger but with something else. Shock, processing. You wrote the eligibility rules. I did. And you didn't tell me. I was scared you'd look at me differently, that it would ruin this. He was quiet for a long moment, the silence stretched heavy. I don't care about money, he said finally. I know, that's why I didn't want you to know. But you also didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. Fallon's breath caught. I wanted to. Every time I saw you, I wanted to. But then I'd look at Maddie or hear you talk about your dad, and I'd think, what if I ruin this? Harvey stood, walked to the window, and looked out over the street. The streetlight cast a soft glow on his face. I've had people look down on me before, for the job, for how I live, even Maddie's teachers. He turned back to her. You never did, not once. I never will. He walked back to the table, picked up the envelope, and held it in his hand without opening it. I'm not mad, he said. I'm just trying to figure out what this means. Fallon stood too, voice low. It means I care, more than I've ever let myself care about anyone. He stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking to nothing. Then don't lie to me again. I won't. You promise? Her voice was barely a whisper. Yes. He nodded once, then looked down at the envelope. Should I open this? Only if you're ready. He slid a finger beneath the seal and pulled out the papers. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. When he looked up, his voice was different, rougher. This says the grant covers full restoration. Materials, labor, permits, everything. Yes. And it lists me as the recipient. You are. He shook his head slowly. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, just let me help. Harvey looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You're not who I thought you were, he said. I can be, she said, if you let me. The sound of boots against plywood echoed through the empty music hall as Harvey walked carefully across the exposed floorboards. Blueprints rolled under one arm. He paused beneath the high arch of the balcony, tilting his head back to look at the cracked ceiling where faded gold leaf flaked like snow from the ornate molding. "This place used to be something," he said aloud. Fallon stood a few paces behind him, hands tucked into the pockets of her tailored coat. "It will be again, because of you." He turned, skeptical. "Because of me." "You've got the vision, I just have the paperwork." He exhaled slowly, then laid the blueprints out on a folding table near the stage. "I've never led anything this big. Fix things, I don't run projects." "You're not fixing," Fallon said, stepping closer. "You're building, that's different." He glanced at the sketches, then back at her. "You're really trusting me with this." "I trust you more than I trust most people I've hired." "You don't even know if I'll pull it off." "I know this every time you walk into a space, you see what it could be. That's more than half the job." Harvey looked around at the worn velvet seats, the dust dancing in shafts of late afternoon light. "I want to keep the original woodwork, and the balcony rail, even if it needs reinforcement." "Do it," Fallon said. "It's yours." He gave a small nod, still absorbing the weight of it all. "You know, I've never had a title before, not when that mattered." "Then let's fix that." She pulled a folder from her bag and handed it to him. "I had the contract rewritten. You're not just the site manager. You're the lead designer and project director. Your name's on everything." He stared at the page. "This is real." "As real as it gets." He didn't speak for a moment, then closed the folder carefully. "Why me?" Fallon leaned against the edge of the table, her voice steady. "Because you see beauty in broken things. You don't need polish to make something valuable." He lowered his eyes, the compliment hitting deeper than she could know. "I've never been with someone who believed in me like this," he said finally. "Not even close." Fallon's expression softened. "I don't just believe in you, Harvey. I admire you." He looked up at her, and for the first time since she told him the truth, he stepped toward her without hesitation. "I don't know what this is," he said, "but I know I want it." "Then take it," she whispered. His hand came up, hesitant, then cupped her cheek like he was afraid the moment might shatter. She leaned in first. The kiss wasn't rushed or desperate. It was quiet, grounded, like two people finally stepping into something they'd both been circling for weeks. When they pulled apart, neither of them moved right away. "I want to tell Maddie," Harvey said, "about us." Fallon nodded. "You should. But I need to make sure we're solid, that this isn't just a whirlwind that ends when the project does." She looked him in the eye. "I didn't fall for you because of a building, and this won't end with one." He let out a breath. "Okay, then let's do this right." They spent the next week working side by side. Fallon stopped wearing heels to the site. Harvey started keeping a notebook in his back pocket to sketch changes on the fly. They argued over lighting once he wanted exposed bulbs. She hated anything industrial, but they compromised with vintage fixtures from a salvage warehouse. One afternoon, Maddie showed up after school, her backpack bouncing as she ran across the dusty floor. "Dad," she called, "they let us out early." He met her halfway, lifting her into a hug. "Did you bring your homework?" "Yeah, but Fallon said she'd help if I got stuck." Fallon smiled from where she stood, brushing sawdust off her sleeves. "I meant it." Maddie looked between them, then tilted her head. "Are you my dad's girlfriend now?" Harvey blinked, Fallon's eyebrows lifted. She started. Maddie shrugged. "It's okay, you can be. I like you better than a mess. Roly, she wore too much perfume." Harvey burst out laughing. Fallon looked as if she wasn't sure whether to thank her or apologize. "Is that a yes?" Maddie pressed. Fallon crouched in front of her. It's a maybe turning into a yes. Maddie nodded, satisfied. Good, because you make my dad smile in a way no one else does. That night, after Maddie had fallen asleep in a pile of blueprints and empty juice boxes, Harvey and Fallon sat on the apartment steps, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. You know, he said, this all started because a shelf almost crushed you. Fallon leaned her head against his shoulder, and you caught it. He chuckled quietly. I still can't believe that happened. I can, she said. You've been catching things long before that shelf. You just didn't realize someone would catch you back. He turned to her, eyes serious. I need you to know something. I wasn't just scared you'd see me differently when you told me the truth. I was scared you'd wake up one day and wonder why you ever fell for a guy like me. I don't wonder, she said. I remember. He frowned gently. Remember what? The way you looked at me like I was a person when you didn't know who I was. The way you talked to Maddie like she's the most important person on earth. The way you walk into a broken building and see something worth saving. He was quiet a moment. Then, you make me want more, not just for me, for her, for us. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers with his. Then take more, she said. It's yours. And for the first time in years, Harvey let himself believe he deserved it. The day of the grand reopening arrived with the kind of crisp morning air that made everything feel possible. The restored music hall stood like a monument to Second, chances its Art Deco facade gleaming under the pale sun, the brass fixtures polished, and every inch whispering a history that had been rescued from silence. Harvey finished adjusting his collar in the reflection of a tall window near the entrance. He wore a tailored black jacket Fallon had insisted he let her buy. It's not a gift, she told him. It's a uniform for the man who rebuilt this place. He hadn't argued, not because he wanted the clothes, but because she'd said it with that look, the one that made him feel like he wasn't just enough, he was essential. Fallon stepped beside him, her hair woven into a low bun, deep navy silk flowing just past her knees. She glanced at his reflection, then straightened the button near his wrist. You're nervous, she said. I'm not used to being the one people come to see. You're not, they're here to see your work. He exhaled, his eyes settling on the front doors where a small crowd had begun to gather. What if they hate it? They won't. And if they do? She looked over at him, certain. Then they weren't the right people. He nodded once, then turned as Maddie came racing up the front steps in a pair of silver ballet flats and a dress with tiny constellations on it. She flung her arms around his waist. You're famous, she said, breathless. There's a guy with a camera inside. He's from the paper, Fallon added. They're doing a full feature. Harvey crouched beside his daughter. You ready to help me cut the ribbon? Do I get to use the giant scissors? You're the only one I'd trust with them. Maddie grinned and skipped back toward the entrance. Fallon waited until she was out of earshot. She told me she wants to be an architect now. He blinked, really? She said she wants to make buildings that feel like music. He laughed softly. That's better than anything I've ever said out loud. She said it because of you. The doors opened soon after, and the place filled with music and chatter and the scent of fresh paint and old wood warmed by stage lights. People wandered through the aisles, some pausing to touch the carved moldings, others gazing up at the restored chandelier that had nearly cost Harvey a week of sleep and a fractured wrist. He stood near the stage, answering questions from sponsors, city officials, and local artists. But his eyes kept drifting toward the mezzanine, where Fallon moved with quiet grace, answering questions of her own. A man in a designer coat approached her, a developer Harvey recognized from one of the city's wealthier enclaves. They shook hands. Harvey didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. Later that night, when the last of the guests had trickled out and the lights dimmed to a soft amber glow, Fallon found him sitting on the edge of the orchestra pit, his jacket draped over a chair, sleeves rolled back. "I thought you disappeared," she said. "I was waiting for the quiet." She sat beside him. "You were incredible tonight." "I kept thinking about my dad. He'd have stood in the back and acted unimpressed while secretly holding back tears. He would have been proud." Harvey turned toward her. "You know what I kept thinking too?" "What?" "That I want you in every part of my life, not just this project, all of it." She blinked once but didn't speak. He stood and stepped down into the pit, then turned and reached out a hand. She took it, letting him pull her to the floor beside him. "I've never had anything like this," he said. "Not the building, not the applause. I didn't even know I wanted it. But you, I knew I wanted you the second you looked at me like I mattered." Fallon's breath hitched. "You always mattered." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a small velvet box, and opened it. Inside was a simple gold ring with a tiny firework of diamonds at the center, elegant and understated. "I didn't buy this with foundation money or with any of your money. I sold the truck, the one with the busted transmission. I figured if I'm going to build a future, I should start with something that moves forward." Fallon stared at him, stunned. "Harvey." "I don't want to wait. I've waited my whole life for something to feel this right, and I know it's fast, but I'm not proposing because it's fast. I'm proposing because I love you, and because Maddie already asked me if she can call you family, and I didn't know how to answer." Fallon covered her mouth with one hand. Her eyes shimmered. "I don't care where we live," he continued. "I don't care what anyone thinks. I just want a life with you, and I want it now." She stepped closer, hands trembling. "You want a yes?" "I want a forever." She dropped her hand from her mouth, smiling through tears. "Then yes, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him into a kiss that was so full of laughter and relief it made everything else the years of struggle, the fear, the secrets feel like they'd all led here. When they pulled apart, Maddie was standing at the balcony rail above them. "Did you just get engaged?" she called. Fallon laughed, breathless. "We did." "Does that mean get to be the flower girl?" Harvey looked up. "Only if you promise not to throw petals at the guests." "I make no promises," she shouted, then disappeared back into the hallway. They stood there in the glow of the lights, the empty theater echoing with a silence that felt like music. Fallon squeezed his hand. "You really sold your truck." "I figured I wouldn't need it." "Why not?" "Because wherever we're going, I'm not going alone." And as the curtain lights dimmed and the city settled outside, Harvey Dalton, once a man who thought he'd missed every chance, stood beside the woman he loved, no longer catching falling things, but building something that would never have to fall again. Fallon stepped out of the back office into the heart of the newly finished music hall, her heels echoing against the polished floor. The stage curtains had just been rehung, deep crimson with gold trim, the same hue as the original archival fabric. The scent of linseed oil still clung faintly to the air. Overhead, the chandelier glowed with soft amber warmth, every crystal painstakingly cleaned by hand. Harvey stood at center stage, sleeves rolled to his elbows as he gestured toward a carpenter adjusting a piano dolly. He looked completely in his element, confident, in control, and grounded in a way he hadn't been when she first met him. Fallon leaned against the edge of the first row, watching. "You're staring," he said, not looking at her. "I'm admiring." He finally turned. "Same difference." "Not even close." He walked to the edge of the stage and hopped down. "Can't believe we're done." "We're not," Fallon said. "We're just starting." He glanced toward the hall's double doors. "You mean the programs?" "I mean everything. The community nights, the art exhibits, the kids' workshops." You sound like you've planned this down to the last detail. I made a list. He raised a brow. Of course you did. She took his hand and led him backstage, where a long hallway had been transformed into a gallery with framed sketches, old playbills, and photographs from the original construction. At the end, a single plaque had been mounted. She paused in front of it. This is the last thing. Harvey read the inscription aloud. Restored under the direction of Harvey Dalton, whose vision brought history back to life. He stared at it, unreadable. Fallon's voice lowered. You once asked what you could build that would last. This is yours. His hand brushed the edge of the plaque. I didn't ask for my name on it. I know, that's why I put it there. He turned to her, emotion flickering in his eyes. You never stop surprising me. Good, I don't plan to. They lingered there until the last of the team left for the evening. Maddie was at a sleepover with her best friend, and for the first time in weeks, there was no deadline, no permit to chase, no shipment to track. Fallon tugged him toward the green room, where she'd laid out dinner on the long makeup table takeout from the little Italian place down the street, 2 wine glasses, and a tiny white cake with marzipan flowers. Harvey blinked. What's the occasion? My fiancé finished his first major restoration. That's a milestone. He sat beside her, loosening his collar. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to. You've spent your whole life doing things for other people. I think it's time someone did something for you. They ate slowly, the kind of meal where silence felt full instead of empty. Fallon poured the last of the wine, then leaned back in her chair. I've been thinking about the wedding, she said. Yeah, I don't want a ballroom. He lifted a brow. What do you want? This place, right here, on the stage under the lights you hung yourself. He considered that. You want to get married in a place we built together. Yes. He smiled, then let's do it. 2 weeks later, the music hall filled again, but this time with rows of white chairs, soft string music playing from the pit, and guests dressed in every shade of joy. Maddie stood at the front in a navy blue dress, holding a bouquet almost bigger than her. Fallon stood behind the curtain, her dress simple and elegant, the same color as the evening sky just before twilight. Harvey waited in the center of the stage, his tie slightly crooked and his hands folded behind his back. When the curtain rose, he forgot every word he'd prepared. Fallon walked down the aisle like she was walking into his life all over again, not grand or showy, just certain, steady, sure. They didn't have vows written. Instead, they spoke from where they stood. I never thought I'd get to build something that mattered, Harvey said, until you. Fallon's voice trembled only once. You caught me, and then you showed me what it meant to be held. The applause when they kissed wasn't polite, it was thunderous. The reception was held in the lobby, with jazz humming from the speakers and candles flickering on every table. Maddie danced in the middle of the room with 2 of Harvey's co-workers, her laughter echoing louder than the music. Fallon leaned into Harvey's side, barefoot now, her shoes kicked off under their table. I've never been this happy, she said. He kissed her temple. That's funny, I was just about to say the same thing. Outside, the city buzzed on, unaware of the small miracle that had unfolded within the walls of an old music hall. But inside, under the gold-trimmed ceiling and the lights Harvey had once hung one by one, a new history had begun. A few months later, as spring bloomed outside the windows, the music hall hosted its first children's art showcase. Maddie stood proudly beside a sculpture she'd made from broken bolts and piano wire, titled Things That Still Work. Fallon wrapped an arm around Harvey's waist. She's got your eye. She's got your fire. I'm glad she has both. As Maddie pulled them toward the next display, Fallon paused, her hand resting over her stomach. I should tell you something. Harvey looked at her, eyebrows raised. She smiled. We're going to need a bigger apartment. He stared for a beat, then grinned slowly, pulling her in with both arms. You're serious? Yes. He kissed her, right there in the middle of the gallery. They didn't care who saw. Because love didn't need marble or ballrooms or silence. It just needed this two people, one future, and a space they built with their own hands. Together. Forever.